UFC 309 is right around the corner. Big card. Madison Square Garden this Saturday night. Paul Brown is here with me, Ian O'Neill, to break down the card in its entirety. John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler, your top two fights, and some other interesting fights as well, Paul, as the card progresses. Let's get straight into it. What's your excitement level for this card, for John Jones's return, and for the fight in general? I think, a lot of the talk has been around this and that and the other, Tom Aspinall and this, and I didn't get too caught up into all of that. I'm here. It's fight week. I'm genuinely looking forward to the fight. I always look forward when John Jones hits the cage, and I'm not letting anything else get in the way of that. For me, that's how I'm looking at it. How are you looking at it?
Yeah, I'm kind of forcing myself to do that as well, because realistically, I've an awful feeling this is the last time we're going to see John Jones in action. I think the rest of it is just none of it's gonna matter after this. I think this is it. So I may be wrong, but we all kind of came up through the sport watching John Jones, and we've seen him do amazing things in the sport. So I think it's time to just sit back now and appreciate. Look, the fight's happening. You can argue about whether or not it should or shouldn't be happening, and I suppose we can talk about that in a little while. But let's just enjoy this, because it may be the last time that we'll ever see him. Like, given the fact that he's only 37 years old, it's probably not massively old for a heavyweight. Sometimes, I mean, he's the same age as Alex Pereira. I think he might even be younger. But like, he's been around at the top of the sport for so long that he's definitely old in MMA terms. Like, the fighters from his generation have all come and gone, and he's still there and still has realistically never been beat. So I think let's just sit back and enjoy this. This could be his swan song.
Yeah, like I think it could be too. Obviously, he did speak about maybe going in there against Alex Bahia, and I mean, if we're being honest, if John Jones wants that, if Alex Bahia wants it, and the UFC wants it, it's likely that that could happen down the line. But obviously, that's Tom out in the cold again, as he has been in the whole heavyweight title picture as well. I think the whole circumstances around this was created by the UFC by creating the interim title. They've created a nice little problem for themselves here with the whole situation, and Tom being the backup fighter as well. So I'm not going to stray too much into that. I mean, the fight is here, the fight is happening, and whether it is the last time we see John Jones or not, he doesn't have too long left. We're not going to see these fight weeks. We're not going to see him make the walk to the cage. We're not going to see him compete too much more in his career, one way or another. John Jones to me is always a calculated customer in, obviously the decisions that he made, in the fights that he chose, the decisions he makes in his fights as well. And I can see where he's coming from certain terms in what the future holds for him. But he was always adamant that he wanted Stipe Miocic, and ever since he got that win, it makes sense why he would want Stipe. You have the most successful light heavyweight champion of all time going up against the most successful heavyweight fighter of all time, and I know that to me is intriguing. We haven't seen too much of John at the heavyweight weight class. Obviously, he was in and out against Cyril Gane in no time. Is this a fight where we might see more of him? It's hard to know. But when it comes to big fights, I think, a lot of the outside noise has pulled this fight back around. But I think once Saturday night comes, I think we'll see everybody being invested, and we get to see, like I said, the greatest light heavyweight champion of all time take on the greatest heavyweight champion in the UFC of all time.
Yeah, it's a really difficult fight in itself to analyze. Like, I was there today, I was thinking, right, I'm gonna just watch back a little bit of these guys in action, and see what I can kind of pull from it. But when you look at it realistically, in the last 3.5 years, the only bit of footage we have is Jones in there just walking through Cyril Gane. You move back a year further than that, you've got Stipe Miocic getting his ass handed to him by Francis. You go back a little bit before that, and it's John Jones looking questionable against Dominic Reyes. So there's no, there's no. When you look at a fighter, I have a rule that if I'm trying to analyze what a fighter is going to look like, I don't really go too far back. I will look at their recent performances, because fighters evolve and change so much, so that it can be, looking at something that they did 10 years ago and expecting to see that same guy in the octagon this Saturday isn't going to be the best way to analyze or predict maybe what you're going to see. So when I'm looking at their, through their records, it's like, yeah, it's just impossible to actually sit down and analyze and see what you're going to get on Saturday. So I think it's more going to be a case of sitting there with questions. There's question marks over it, which is a thing that makes fights exciting for me. It makes me want to watch a fight because there's questions to be answered rather than, if I'm seeing like, Ilya Topuria going in there and fighting somebody that has no right to be in a title fight against him. I know what's going to happen. I know he's going to knock him out. There's no question marks surrounding the fight. This one has question marks surrounding the fight. So I'm very intrigued as to what we're going to see. I don't think either guy is remotely close to his prime. I think Stipe certainly looked like he had diminished from, for example, the first time he fought Francis. He wrestled him, he ragdolled him, bullied him, and he tried to do it in that last one when he fought him, and Francis defended it with ease and got him into the turtle position and landed bombs on him, and then when they got back to the feet, he finished him. So I think we definitely saw a diminished Stipe Miocic at that stage, and here we are 3.5 years later. Or 4 years later now, isn't it? And yeah, the same lies with Jones. I mean, I remember watching the Dominic Reyes fight, and at the time thinking, oh, I think he lost that, and it's I don't know.
I think the level of diminishment on both sides is definitely there, but I think the one key thing, and I spoke about this ahead of John Jones versus Cyril Gane. I do, and I truly believe this. Motivation was a huge problem for John Jones when you're going in to fight the likes of Dominic Reyes, Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos, and with all due respect, because put yourself into his shoes. You're a 23-year-old young man. You get the opportunity to rise up and challenge Shogun Rua for the title. You go in there, you absolutely obliterate him, and then you go through the who's who of legends in the light heavyweight division, and some current talent as well. Obviously, Alexander Gustafsson, Daniel Cormier. And when I think, what John Jones was going through was a lack of motivation in those latter light heavyweight fights, which kind of sprung the move for him to go up to the heavyweight division to get him afraid again, get him motivated again. I would imagine someone of John Jones' kind of ego and opinion of himself, he probably thought he could do the bare minimum against the likes of Anthony Smith, Santos, and Reyes and still get the job done. And luckily for him, he did. He did manage to do that. It was damn close in a few of those fights. But we have to remember he struck Anthony Smith with an illegal knee when Anthony Smith was down. If Anthony Smith hadn't refused to continue, that could have ended in a disqualification for him as well. So
I bet you Anthony Smith's bank manager is disgusted with that, because the pay-per-view points he would have got from even one title defense. My God.
Stop the lights, crazy. But I think what we did see in his last fight, you say you don't want to go back too far. You go back to the last fight. I think what we did see, Paul, in that fight is a motivated John Jones. And I think that's the John Jones that's going to come in here to take on Stipe Miocic on Saturday night as well. And I think that version of John Jones, even though he's at the latter stages of his career, is a very, very dangerous individual. And maybe it was a motivation factor for Stipe as well, having to go in and defend again, getting to the latter stages of his career. It takes a lot for him to kind of come off of this kind of break and to challenge himself. And I think John Jones was the only guy that was going to make him do that. So I think we're going to see two motivated individuals. And then what it comes down to is skills versus skills for me. And I give John Jones the advantage in a lot of areas, to be honest, and I'm not sure if I have the same amount of questions that you might have. I'm curious as to what questions that you might have coming into this fight, Paul.
Yeah, there's a couple of factors about the fight that are interesting. Is that Stipe is pretty much in and around the same size as Jones, with a similar weight walking around. Stipe was always one of the lighter, quicker heavyweights, and I think that plays into Jones's hands. Like when Stipe fought Francis, there was a 30-pound weight difference. There's none of that going on this time around, and I think for Jones that's ideal. I think at the moment, if I'm not mistaken, Jones is heavier than Miocic, or he's heavier than Miocic weighed in for his last fight anyway, because he said something there last week about what weight he was on. I can't remember where he was.
I think he's heavier than Miocic, but I think he's coming in lighter than he did against Cyril Gane. But we won't truly know until the weigh-in happens. But I think that's what he's saying anyway.
That's it, yeah. So there's sort of two cruiserweights, really, aren't they, coming into this, which suits Jones, I think, perfectly. And I think that's probably one of the factors why he's not really that interested in a match against someone like an Aspinall or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I think he's at an age now where he's being clever, and like you mentioned earlier, making the right decisions for his career. He's picking fights that he knows he has a really good chance of winning too. So he's, I think, you're right in that he does have that little bit more in his arsenal than Stipe does. That being said, if Stipe turns up and he is a very good version of the Stipe that we once knew and loved, I mean, he's dangerous himself. So it's that's where the question marks are for me. I'm just interested to see how the two of them look. I don't think either of them are the best heavyweight in the world at the moment. I don't think either of them can be really considered the real champion because of all the other fluff that's going on. I just don't think either of them are at their best or at the top of that weight class standard wise now, just purely because of age and mileage. But I think it's a really intriguing matchup in that respect, you know.
It definitely is. And, for me, looking at, talking about weight and size coming in, I think the fact that John Jones is coming in a little bit lighter here and doesn't have as much to carry around is going to make him quicker. Will he use that quickness on the feet? Will he look to try and take this fight down? Because, we're talking about risk and reward here, Paul. I think the big risk for John Jones in this fight is if he was to stand right across from Stipe Miocic and just try and outstrike him, because, Stipe hits hard. He has knockout ability. Do you see John Jones trying out on the feet a little bit? Do you see him taking Stipe down immediately? What kind of route do you see John Jones taking in terms of game plan here on Saturday night?
Yeah, I would imagine the fact that he's would maybe lead me to believe that he plans on being on his feet and moving around and trying to be that little bit more elusive. Like, he plays that long range game so very well, doesn't he? He uses the weapons he has. Still has a reach advantage over Stipe. I think it's 3 or 4 inches still, like, even though he's up a weight class, because I think, I don't know if it's the case now, but for a long time he had the longest reach in the entire UFC anyway, so even though he wasn't a heavyweight. Yeah, that's my hunch, is that he's planning on just staying elusive and frustrate Stipe with those long range weapons, those leg kicks, those long kicks. The oblique kicks, I don't think, are going to the leg are going to be as much of an issue, because he likes to use them when his opponent's in the southpaw stance. Stipe doesn't really switch stances a hell of a lot. So I think he is going to be just trying to keep him on the end of the jab and maybe sort of pick him off and death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing before seizing his opportunity if he gets it. I don't think he's going to come out and try and Khabib him, the way he did to Cyril Gane. Because the fact that he's staying that bit lighter.
I honestly think that he is, to be honest. I honestly think he's going to come in and try and take him down immediately and try and get him out of there easily. It's, I think that, like I said, John Jones being very calculated in his decisions, I think, he's the most safest in there against Stipe when Stipe is on his back. So I don't know whether he's going to try and stand and bang with him all too much. Like, I don't think he's going to rush across the cage and take him down straight away, but I reckon he's going to try and time Stipe the way he tried to time Cyril Gane, and committing to that shot and then just timing that shot off a takedown, getting the fight down. And then, I mean, we've seen DC manhandle Stipe in the cage. We've seen, Francis have his way in the grappling, and I don't see any reason as to why John Jones isn't going to be able to take him down as well. And I think if he does, and he does early when they're dry, I think it's going to be big trouble for Stipe early days. And I think my official prediction is a round 1 submission. I'm going all in on John Jones here, just absolutely wiping the floor with Stipe, because I just think, that's the statement that he needs to make and he wants to make. I think he wants to go out there, put him away early, and then just go on about his business, take as little damage as possible, and maybe retire, maybe on to the next one.
Yeah, Jesus, you're right. Now maybe he could be looking to have a repeat of the Cyril Gane thing. I don't know if it's as easy to do it against Stipe as it is than it was against Cyril Gane. And Cyril Gane looked desperately bad, didn't he? Once that fight hit the cage. Oh, it was a non-performance, really. But it's difficult to predict. Like I said, when we haven't seen either of them really in action in years now at this point, outside of those kind of couple of minutes against Cyril Gane, it's so tough to analyze what performance we're going to see. And I'm just looking forward to it. I'm going to sit back and enjoy it. And I just hope that neither of them looks just like a shell of the former selves in there, because it'd be a shit way to go out for like a Stipe Miocic to come in there and look as bad as Cyril Gane did there, because Cyril Gane prior to that was getting all the flowers. Everyone was saying how good he was, and ever since that we've all just been talking about how crap he looked that night. Do you know what I mean? And if Stipe was to just do that and then be finished, that's a bad way for Stipe to go out after what he's achieved in the sport. And Jones, I mean, if Jones looks like a bag of shite here on Saturday too, it'd be an awful shame. I think any discussion about him fighting Tom Aspinall will be out the window. Any discussion about him fighting Alex Pereira would be out the window. So I don't think either fighter needs to sell a dud here on Saturday night. I'd like to see both of them look good, and if it turns out to be a cracking fight between the two, happy days.
Yeah, happy days is right. It's going to be a belter one way or another anyway, so I'm really looking forward to it as well. Let's move on to the co-main event. Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. Cracking fight here, Paul. A rematch of a fight that has happened before at where was it at? UFC. I'm going to get it up here, and it's taking long to load.
It's a while ago, this one.
It's a while ago. It was UFC 262 back in 2021. Charles Oliveira left hook, ground and pound in round 2, finished Michael Chandler for the light heavyweight or the lightweight championship. What do you think of this fight? Do you think it makes sense to make the rematch? Are you excited to see it again? I mean, the first fight was a wild fight. It was, fairly crazy at times. Both fighters were hurt. Obviously, Charles did land a killer blow in round 2 and got the job done.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't excited to see it because, it's kind of nonsensical in matchup terms. I mean, we've seen it already. Surely there were other matchups around the division that both guys could have been put into. But having sat down and rewatched the original fight now today, I think I am excited to see it, because I've forgotten how close that Michael Chandler came to finishing Charles Oliveira, not just with the guillotine, but his strikes were causing Oliveira real problems, and he had him rocked, and he looked sensational in that first round. He did then what he always does, just caution to the wind and shifting forward and slamming those shots right down the pipe, and big looping ones too. And he rocked Dobronx a few times. Dobronx just caught him at the start of that second and put him away, and that was all she wrote. I don't think this one's going 3 rounds either. Both guys like to just get on the attack, and I think it just makes for a super exciting fight. Like I said, it doesn't make the most sense in matchmaking terms because we know how it went the first time, but that's not to say that it's going to go that way this time. I mean, this could. Again, we haven't seen Michael Chandler in action in a couple of years now because of the whole
that's
McGregor
the big
thing,
question. Yeah, that's the big question coming in here. He's been out with the cage for a long time. That can help or can hinder you a little bit. I mean, it can help you in terms of, your recovery, and you're not taking any extreme damage when you're in there in live action. But at the same time, if you don't want to be coming in here rusty and out of timing and everything like that against a guy like Charles Oliveira, who's like a killer, to be honest. He's waiting for you to make a mistake where he can jump on that. And I'm very curious. Like, we haven't seen November the 12th, 2022 is the last time that we've seen Michael Chandler inside the cage. Almost
2
just
years
a little bit over 2 years ago yesterday. So, I mean, it's interesting. I would fancy Charles to kind of get one over again. I think, it's very, very hard, and we've seen it with a lot of fighters to come back in after you lose against somebody to kind of turn it around and get a win. We have seen it, but more often than not, the guy who gets the win the first time normally comes out and gets the win the second time. I think the experience that Charles and both Michael Chandler will have gained from that, but what Oliveira has, and which might give him the advantage here, is that more activity coming in here. Obviously, he was hurt and he fell out of the title shot, but he's been active. He fought Beneil Dariush last year, and I expect him to be coming in fairly sharp here and fairly confident in getting the job done. Who would you be leaning for in this one, Paul?
Yeah, I'd be following that train of thought. I mean, he looked really good against Beneil Dariush. I mean, I know against Makhachev in his title shot, he seemed to tap very, very quickly, but like he was hurt. He was hurt, and when you get hurt, and then someone with that kind of squeeze dives in an arm triangle, sometimes you got no choice but to tap out. And we looked at it at that point. We were like, did he tap early? Did he look like he was happy to just get out of there? And did he look like he kind of quit, pulled the parachute a little bit? But he looked good in his comeback fight then against Dariush. He looked excellent, in fact, and that head kick was beautiful. He fought earlier this year, and he fought Arman Tsarukyan, and that went to, was it a split decision? It was a close fight.
Very close fight, yeah, very close.
Yeah, I mean, that's a serious level of competition. And for Michael Chandler to be coming in after 2 years off, you mentioned possible cage rust. That could play a factor here. So those are the type of things that would make me lean towards Oliveira. The other thing the other way I could be looking at it is after Oliveira losing his title, and then maybe, he beat Dariush, but they came back and lost another one. So he's lost 2 of the last 3. Where's his head at? That's what I'd like to know as well. Like, is he going to come in here as the same driven, hungry Charles Oliveira that got all the way to the belt and, had a couple of nice wins as champion? Or, he didn't look too bothered having lost to Tsarukyan. Is he going to be maybe tailing off and just going, look, I'm happy to just pick up an appearance and a paycheck here? And, is he going to get caught cold by a Michael Chandler who's been maybe chomping at the bit for the last 2 years? So just like the main event, there's question marks there. Like, I'd be more than likely leaning towards Oliveira, but when the two of these guys get in the cage, it's like throwing your keys in a bowl and rattling around. You don't know who's you're going to pull back out, So
I don't know what you be up to on your nights out, Paul, but
you know how it goes, Ian. But these guys are going to be doing that on Saturday. They're going to be gambling when they get in that cage, because that's the only style the two of them know how to implement. They don't really fight overly defensively. They both just kind of throw a load of shit at the wall and see what sticks. And it made for a great fight the first time, and I think it's going to make for a cracking fight again this Saturday night.
It will, when you got two guys who are just willing to throw balls to the wall, wild shots. I mean, it's about who lands flush first, to be honest. And it'll be very, very exciting to see how that one goes down. I'm very excited for that one too. I'm also very excited for Bo Nickal, who has a really, really good test here against Paul Craig. I mean, we might give the matchmaker some criticism at the best times, but I didn't know I wanted this fight until I seen this fight, because it's a great stylistic matchup to test Bo Nickal in terms of the style that Paul Craig possesses, but also the experience that Paul Craig has in the octagon in the past, going in there against top level guys and winning against top level guys. I mean, you're talking about a guy in Paul Craig who has wins over the likes of Jamal Hill, and who's the other guy that he beat?
Magomed Ankalaev. Did he beat
Ankalaev as well? Yeah, he beat Ankalaev in the last buzzer beater as well. So, I mean, a good resume. Lost these last 2. Flirted with the middleweight division. He's lost 2 since he's gone down there. Maybe this might be the swan song for him at 185. I don't know, but it's a very interesting fight here. How do you see it going down? You think Bo Nickal is just going to have too much for him? We've seen wrestlers going in against jiu-jitsu artists before, Paul. You can speak better than me as a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt as to what problems Paul Craig is going to have to deal with a solid, pure wrestler like Bo Nickal.
Yeah, and I believe Bo Nickal, not only he's one of the best wrestlers who's probably ever set foot inside the octagon, or he's definitely up there. I believe he's actually a sensational submission grappler too. Do you know what I mean? Like he's been in there. I'm trying to look on his record here. Has he been in there with Gordon Ryan and guys like that? No, but he's had submission grappling matches like at a high level, and by all accounts, any high level guys he's trained with, he's given them nightmares, So he's just 6-0, isn't he? His pro record. Reading it up here.
That's right. Yeah,
6-0. So like it's a nothing record really, because you've got a couple of Contender Series appearances and then a couple of low level UFC opponents that he ran through. He can strike. He's got power. It's not the tidiest, most technical striking you'll ever see. It's kind of
like Khabib's in a way, isn't it? Khabib never really was a great striker, but his wrestling petrified his opponent so much that it actually opened up his striking a little bit. And I think it's actually the same thing that you're dealing with here with Bo Nickal too. Is like, we saw in the last fight, or no, the Val Woodburn fight, that he ended that where he just level changed and shot the overhand. And I think the threat, even though his striking isn't great, I think the threat of his wrestling opens up his striking a hell of a lot more than maybe someone else with similar kind of striking tendencies to him.
It's huge, yeah. And the thing with these guys, the elite level wrestlers are insanely athletic, and I think this guy has just that elite level athleticism, and I think that stands out. I mean, you think of UFC fighters, these guys are all exceptional athletes, but there's levels in athleticism, and there's guys like Bo Nickal that are just outliers there, that no matter how much a guy like I know Paul Craig's strength and conditioning coach, Adam, and he's one of the best in the game. He's a really good guy, and I know Paul Craig has been for years doing insane high level strength and conditioning there, but he can do that for his whole life, and he'll never reach the levels of athleticism that Bo Nickal possesses genetically. You know what I mean? This is a different beast. So when you're fighting someone like that, it just dwindles down your percentage of opportunity to win the fight. It really, really does have a knock-on effect. I've been on the mats with guys that I'm so much better than, but when they have just that insane athletic advantage, it's so problematic. It really flips the script on you, and you have to you really, really have to be on your game just to get anything going against them. So like you mentioned there, the matchmaking's brilliant, because this is what Bo Nickal needs now. He needs to be moved on, because I know he's only 6-0, but I don't know how old he is. He's probably 27, 28. He's 27, I think.
He's thereabouts anyway, Paul. I think he's not.
Yeah,
he's young enough still in his career. 28 right
28,
now.
Yeah, so move him up now. Like, there's no point in him fighting these guys.
Yeah, we're at a stage where you don't want to go in and see him truck guys. You want to go in, like, I think this fight,
the mid-level guys like this are the guys he needs.
Yeah, well, it's the perfect jump up for him. Like, I mean, he's handled all the previous tests with no problem whatsoever, and those fights, we were like, he's going to go in, and there's more of a level of expectation that he's going to get the win. For this one, few more questions. Although I do think he still will get the win. Paul Craig is a guy that can go out there and on his day and cause a lot of people problems inside the cage. So I think the mixture of the level of experience that he has with the level of inexperience that Bo Nickal has makes this a great fight in my mind. And I'm very excited to see what happens in it. I think Bo Nickal will probably go out there and get the win. He'll set up another couple of big fights for him, but I think kudos to the matchmakers for this one.
There's
go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
I was going to say there are some fascinating other grapplers in that division now too. I mean, we saw Rainer the Ritter making his debut last weekend. And
I'd love to see Bo Nickal versus Rainer the Ritter.
And of course you've got Muniz, who I think Paul Craig beat in his middleweight debut. He's an excellent grappler as well. Correct. So you've got guys of that ilk that Bo Nickal. It's just fascinating to see him fight all of those guys before you start even thinking about putting them up towards where Caio Borralho and Israel Adesanya and those guys are sitting. But let them get like 3 or 4 at around this level, and those are the guys that probably aren't that capable of knocking him out, but they might be happy enough to engage in some grappling. Those are fun fights. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've always shot on the middleweight division, but it is starting to spark into a little bit of life now with a couple of contenders coming up. Obviously, Khamzat Chimaev up at the top of the rankings, and Dricus du Plessis, obviously the champion. So, middleweight is kind of making a comeback, as one might say. In the 125-pound division, the women's 125-pound division, Karine Silva versus Viviane Araújo. Brazil versus Brazil action here. Karine Silva has been very, very impressive in her rise up the rankings. Paul comes in here against a stern test against Viviane Araújo. We know what they expect here from Karine Silva. It's going to be, for me, how Araujo adjusts to her game. Will she let her have her way on the feet? She's very good distance control and striking, very quick. We've seen her knock out a couple of fighters, Karine Silva, on her way up. Knocked out another fellow Brazilian in her last fight in Ariane Lipski da Silva. That fight went, no, she didn't knock her out. That fight went to a decision. But, she has a chance.
3 submissions in a row before that, like.
Yeah. She's a talented fighter. She's very well rounded, and she's got a tough test in front of her here on Saturday night.
Yeah, this is like we talked about the last fight. This is a really good step up in competition because she looks like a fascinating little prospect. She's, I think, 4-0 in the UFC. 3 of those wins have been against fellow Brazilians. I love a bit of Brazil on Brazil action, and I'm all for it. She's really good. I'm just looking at the record here. I watched some of these finishes back today. Poliano Botelho, she caught her in a beautiful darce. And then a couple of fights later, Moreau's that guillotine where she tapped her. She got the tap right at the final second of the first round. She's got a serious squeeze. But the one that I love, they're calling it a knee bar here on Tapology over Caitlin Souza. It was a beautiful, she was sitting in her guard and she kind of just popped up and sat back on a leg lock. And it was like she was sitting back on a straight ankle lock, but instead of putting her heel on Souza's hip, she actually reaped her leg all the way across the knee. And as she was pulling the leg back, she used her legs to clamp and drive the leg inwards. So the knee the knee, which can kind of bend like a hinge, it snapped sideways. And it went. So that was an exceptional finish. And I love seeing people like that who just go for stuff aggressively and dynamically. And those 3 submissions I just talked about, she was on all of them in a flash. And she looks like she's got that vice-like grip when she gets a hold of something. So I'm really intrigued to see, can she implement her game here? Like you talked about there, she's got really good striking. She's not just a dangerous grappler. She's got exceptionally tidy, technical striking. She's sharp and fast. But then, she draws you into this striking matchup and then changes levels and gets a hold of your hips and gets you down. I'm really interested to see, can she do that against Araújo, who's, a fairly accomplished wrestler in the division. She's got strong grappling herself. So I think she will get by her. I think she's just got that little bit more of a killer instinct, and she's got more kind of ways to win the fight. But the levels, she's going up a couple of levels here. So it's a really interesting test for her.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing how she handles this one as well against Araújo. I'm it's hard to know. I think if she goes out and gets a finish here, she should probably get a top 5, even if a win over Araújo could kind of promote her up into the top 5 of the rankings. Maybe give her I wouldn't say maybe a title eliminator, but definitely a good test against an elite level opponent. But really exciting.
You're up there now in that top 5, and she's kind of fallen away a little. So I think if she gets through here, you could see her earning a high-profile fight like that going forward,
Yeah, it's a good shout. It's definitely a good shout. And I'm excited to see that one, a good one. Also very excited for the main card opener as well.
I have a side note there. Sorry, I'll draw you back there to Karine Silva. Do you know who she beat on the Contender Series and submitted on the Contender Series and put away to get into the UFC? The girl who we just saw in a fight with the great Danny McCormick.
True that.
That girl's a little tank, a little killer. And we saw how Danny was having to contend with some real power. But
and Jan Cuihi in that, Jan Cuihi in that fight fucking had Karine Silva not in trouble, but she was making her work for sure. So it's crazy how things work. It's unfortunate for Danny now, but we'll see what happens down the line. What will happen in the main event is I expect this to be an absolutely bludgeoning by Mauricio Rufy against James Lontop. Rufy is a serious striker. Looking back at his fights, his striking style is very similar to Conor McGregor, isn't it?
Yeah, brilliant. Like, and I think it was it Dean Thomas mentioned it on the commentary on his UFC debut. He's had one fight in the UFC, and that was on a pay-per-view at 301, and now they're putting him in this weekend as well. So, they clearly love him. They clearly really rate this guy. And you could see just watching him, that performance against who was it he beat in his UFC debut? Can't remember.
Jamie Malarkey.
Yeah, and it was very reminiscent of McGregor's debut performance, wasn't it? He was just bang, 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 slipping out of range. The way he just managed the distance, and he was just impossible to hit. And I love the way that he just does weird, unorthodox stuff. Like he ran across the cage and threw that sort of crouch down, sweeping calf kick thing and popped back up. And then that scissor takedown as well. Like, I love fighters that just do weird stuff off the cuff. And he's a really exciting talent. And look, obviously the UFC are putting a lot of faith in him too if they're giving him these high-profile slots at pay-per-views.
Yeah, I mean, look, you go out and you do what you do against a tricky guy in Jamie Malarkey. You get this, and the fact that they're making him open up the main card slot, he's in a damn good slot here, and I reckon that it's going to be another win here. I think we're going to see a big 2025 for Mauricio Ruffi of the Fighting Nerds, who have had a really, really good year so far for the gym. Let's run down through a couple of the prelim fights here real quick. I'll lash a few over to you, Paul, and I'll get your opinions on a few of them. 135 pounds, Jonathan Martinez versus Marcus McGee. I think this is a really good fight. I think Marcus McGee has been looking really good, as has Jonathan Martinez in recent fights too. And I mean, this is a jump up and an opportunity for Marcus McGee to kind of come in to kind of take everything that Martinez has worked for over the last number of years since he's moved down to 135 pounds. Obviously, coming off that loss to Jose Aldo in his last fight, no shame about that whatsoever. But McGee has been looking very sharp and been looking very good in his recent fights. And he's coming in here off the back of a 5 or 6 fight win streak. About 5 fight win streak coming into this one. And it's been looking better and better every time he's gotten in there, Paul.
Yeah, I'm looking at the record there, 3-0 so far in the UFC, and he's finished all 3 of them as well. So, another fighter who's earned this slot. What are they? The headliner of the prelims, aren't they? So that's
prelims headliner, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's usually seen as a slot of real value. There's a lot of eyes usually on that one. People will watch the prelims for free on TV in the States, and then the main event of the prelims is on, and they usually kind of bank on that being an exciting fight and getting people to get out the credit card and buy that pay-per-view. So it's a good slot for both fighters. Like you mentioned, Martinez, of course, lost to Aldo. Of course, there's no shame in that because Aldo is still an elite fighter, and prior to that, he was on a long winning streak himself. So what a slot for both fighters! What an opportunity, and they've earned it. 2 of them are exceptional talents.
Yeah, absolutely. Next fight on Roberto Romero versus David Onama in the 145-pound division. Don't know too much about Romero. Obviously, Onama has been looking good in his UFC tenure so far. Been a couple of ups and downs for him. Obviously, coming off the loss from Nate Landwehr, he's won his last 2 against Gabriel Santos, Jonathan Pierce. So I'd be surprised if he didn't go out and get the job done here as well, Paul.
Yeah, you'd imagine he's got that bit more experience, doesn't he? And his opponent here, I'm crawling through his record. Yeah, it's his UFC debut. He was with Combache before that. So actually has a loss to Pa Lahan.
Yeah.
Look, Pa. There you go. There's so he's got a bit of Irish heritage ingrained in his forehead there. A few knuckle sandwiches from Pa. Go on. But UFC debut. So I mean, there's not a whole lot that we can really like we haven't seen yet if he's up to this level, and it's certainly a difficult test he's got in front of him for his first day out.
For sure, I would agree 100%. Janita Denise, I spoke to him last week. His fight obviously fell the week before last, I guess. He was supposed to fight Derek Lewis in UFC Edmonton. That fight fell off, coming in against Marcin Tybura. Denise is a very good and esteemed kickboxer coming into MMA, undefeated so far at 8-0. Tybura was not matched for this card, I don't believe. So I think it's a short notice fight for him. So look at fair play to fucking Tybura coming in here and taking on this challenge, I tell you. And obviously it's a heavyweight, Denise, so no weight cutting would have to really be taking place. So, but I mean, you're coming in against an undefeated kickboxer here. It's a tough one for Tybura.
It is like, and I mean, he's been around the UFC a long time. We're just checking the total number of UFC fights. Yeah, he's up to 20 UFC fights already. So yeah, I mean, he's got to be hoping that that's gonna hold some value for him going into this one. It's a young prospect going in there against a really experienced fighter, and you're going to see a lot of this in the UFC because they're signing so many fighters now who are coming in there with so little overall experience because of the Contender Series kind of pathway into the UFC. So it's a kind of sink or swim time, isn't it? This is about as tough an experience test as you can get, but he has looked very exciting. You're right now.
Well, I mean, he was going in there. He was going in there against Derek Lewis, a 30-fight UFC veteran. Now he's going in against a 20-fight UFC veteran. So he was getting the veteran test one way or another coming in here, and I'm looking forward to seeing. It was obviously disappointing for him not to be able to fight against Derek Lewis, but at least he got some action on this card, and undefeated prospect. He's either going to look brilliant or he's either going to tire himself out and look really, really bad in the later stages.
Two heavyweights leaning on each other against the fence for 2.5 rounds. I hope not.
Last 3 fights I'll rattle through real quick. Mickey Gall back in action against Ramiz Brimahij in the 170-pound division. Also in the 170-pound division, the Welsh gangster Oban Elliott versus Basil Hafez. Veronica Hardy takes on Eduardo Mora in the 125-pound division. That will open up the card on Saturday night. Paul, your thoughts on the 3 of those fights? Obviously, there's extra added interest here on Oban Elliott.
Yeah, Oban and Veronica, who I kind of got to know a little bit over there. I was at Bellator in London a couple of months back. Got to kind of hang out with her, and I got to train with her as well. And I have to say, I was blown away by how good she was on the mat. Now, she put it on me. She's only a tiny little thing, but like she's an excellent grappler. Like really, really good. She caught me in. I don't know if you've watched Cade Ruotolo competing in one championship in the grappling. Have you seen him?
I have.
Do you know the Ruotolo team? It's like a dart from a rear naked choke position almost.
Oh yeah.
She caught me in a sort of a modified version of that, and like it was on, and I was like, "No, this isn't on. I'm okay." And the lights started going out. I had to pull the ejector cord. I was like, "Shit, you fucking got me." That was nice. So yeah, she's really, really physically strong, but she's an excellent technical grappler. And she's a really good southpaw striker as well. She's sharp and dynamic. She's shown great improvements over the last couple of years, really. I think she's a dark horse in that division. Don't know much about her opponent now. Her opponent's 10-1, I believe. So, she's obviously no slouch herself, but it's a cracking slot, isn't it? You get to open up a card in Madison Square Garden, but I've definitely going to have one eye on that fight, And big Oban, yeah, huge fan of Oban, I have to say. I met Oban working for Cage Warriors a couple of times last year. I got to interact with him. I'll tell you a nice story about Oban, actually. So everyone is probably seeing the things that, like, he was on Ariel's show yesterday, and he spoke really well about, the death of his father and how it impacted him and just suicide in general. And, he comes across as a guy that, as Ariel worded, it was like he's a guy that you want to root for, because he comes across as a genuine, good guy. He's a really engaging personality, but that's definitely him. Like that's 100% him. I met him when he came over to Dublin to fight James Sheehan, my teammate. And my job for Cage Warriors would be to meet these main card fighters when they come in. They check in at the hotel when they arrive. Make sure that they know where to go for their media engagements, like they have to go for their video interviews, blah blah blah. And I just basically have to introduce myself and say, look, here's my phone number, and if you need anything over the next couple of days, you're here for fight week, just you let me know and you give me a shout, and I just kind of have to make sure they have everything they need,
Yeah.
So I met Oban, he checked in, and I had to bring him up to get his videos and his photographs done. So I says, come on, we'll wander up. Never met the guy before. So we walked up, and someone else was in the video room just finishing. So we kind of snuck in and we sat down at the back just watching. And he was sitting beside me, and it was like a cramped little room. And he says to me, where are you from? So I told him, I said, like, oh, I live here. I live in Dublin, like. And then he was like, right, do you know my opponent? And I told him, I said, like, yeah, he's me mate. Like, I trained with him, like. So he went quiet. And about 30 seconds later, he said, look, I'll totally understand if you don't want to like interact with me or talk to me over the next couple of days, I won't take offense. Don't worry about it. I understand he's your friend, and I don't want it to be awkward. Just it's all good. So I was like, no, Jesus, no, like that's no. It's absolutely fine. That's not like how I fucking roll with these things. But I was taken aback a little bit by it, because he's sitting there like just about over 48 hours out from the biggest fight of his life, and he sat there for like about 30 seconds or a minute, and he was just fretting about how I would feel if if I was going to feel awkward having to help him out with this, that, and the other. So I just thought that was a really nice thing for him to do. You know, he was just trying to put my mind at ease, and I was like, Jesus,
very selfless, you know.
Yeah, you know, just a genuine guy. He's not sitting there thinking about himself, and I wouldn't, like, I'd be sitting there fucking stressing about my own problems rather than stressing about the problems of the Irish lad sitting across from me if I was in his shoes. So I thought that was nice. And then I met him after the fight, and you know, back at the hotel, I popped back for a drink with a couple of the guys from Cage Warriors, and I had a chat with Owen for about half an hour. And he's just a lovely, genuine, down there, friendly guy. And yeah, always rooting for him since then. So fingers crossed now he gets the job done. His story has been brilliant, hasn't it? The whole Contender Series thing, the big win over Kite Brito, and the way he got into the UFC. So I think we all have his back now.
Yeah, like, I mean, he's doing everything perfectly outside the cage, but he's also doing everything perfectly inside the cage as well. I know he'll be hunting for that finish, but you know what you want to see with a guy like Oban when he's going in there is, you know, the growth as a fighter and the confidence levels raising. And I think with every win, the first one on the Contender Series, obviously, and you know, the Val Woodburn and the last one against Preston Parsons as well, you know, we've seen growth, but I know he would love a finish, and I think he's got a chance to get a finish here against Basel Hafez. And you know, Basel will be dangerous early days, I think, but I think he can be got at. But you know, it'll be interesting to see how it goes for Oban here. And yeah, we're all like, I mean, it's hard not root for a guy like that. So we wish him all the best. And yeah, very exciting card from top to bottom. Really looking forward to it. Madison Square Garden, always a special card, always a special kind of a night and a feel. Really excited to see John Jones getting back in there in action against Stipe Miocic. Two legends. I think, you know, if we take anything from the preview and what we're going in is, you know, try and focus on the positive of this fight. Try and focus on the fight for what it is. It's not going to change now. Fingers crossed, I guess, you know, that strange things can happen. And yeah, enjoy John Jones. I think for me, I've had to decide to do with John Jones is separate the art from the artist. And, you know, what he's been able to do inside the cage has been pretty special, and is one of the greatest to do it of all time. And, you know, obviously the outside of the cage antics do pour cold water on him as a person and stuff like that. But like I said, when he's in there and that cage door is locked, it's always a good time, always worth looking on. And I'm sure it will be again on Saturday night. Thank you so much, Paul, for taking the time to break down the card with me. Always fun to do it. And everybody enjoy the fights on Saturday. We'll be, I don't know what's happening for the breakdown next week, but we'll have something coming your way. So
definitely.
Yeah, we'll talk to you next week. Enjoy the fights this weekend, guys. Take care. God bless.